of the courtroom, under bright white light. Two plastic hearts found love at first sight. One had a bullet hole, the other had a frown. But when the trial paused, oh baby, love went down. It's hot mannequin love in the court of law. No breath, no blood, just a flawless jaw. Struck a pose, then struck a spark. Made of fiberglass, but lit up the dark. Hot mannequin love with the lenses askew. Who knew Exhibit A would look so into you? She leaned just right, he's sweet just so. Like Cupid fired a dart through a Velcro torso. The jury looked confused, the bailiff blushed, the stenographer typed. Objection, they're flushed. Hot mannequin love, no heartbeat, no shame. But they set off fire a dart through a Velcro torso. The jury looked confused, the bailiff blushed, the stenographer typed. Objection, they're flushed. Hot mannequin love, no heartbeat, no shame. But they set off fire, the law's just the same. Crime scene dolls, now courtroom flames. In love so real, it should be in chains. Hot mannequin love, not illegal but true. Just don't let the judge catch them kissing in view.
Hello, what's up? Happy Monday. Snapchat told me it was a magical Monday. I said it was lying. There's no such thing. But we are doing our best. You guys all had a great weekend and have had a great day. And then I just questioned myself if it was Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. I don't know. The things that I normally do today, I didn't do. Things I normally don't do, I did. So now I don't know. I'll be off all week. It's okay. I'll still be here. What's up, Gabby? Good evening, associates. Haven't heard that in a while. Flashman, are you just waking up again? I'm dandy. I am dandy. What's up, Carmen? Your leg is what should be probably elevated and straight, not bent. Hello, Tink. How are you doing? It's good to see you. I know I saw June down here. Hello, June. Hope you are doing well. That is very true. Snapchat don't know nothing. Lies. Yes, I knew it. I said to myself at the end of the song, today's Monday. It's Monday. It's Monday. And then I thought about what I did today. I'm like, wait, is today not Monday? Because I had my granddaughter for a little while this morning, and I don't normally have her on Mondays. I don't know. I don't know. You figured you'd say something I hadn't heard in a while. Thanks. Hey, Shinny. Hope you are feeling better. I saw that you have been not feeling well. And we can't have that. We need our Shinny around. So hope all is well. Oh, you're stepping in. Stepping in for Miss Ada, right? Good times, good experience. And good for you, June. That's really nice of you. All right, so we are in the final stretch of Betty Broderick. We're getting there. We're getting there. We are going to start with the final. So we saw last week, we ended with the state the defense resting the state's We saw one rebuttal witness. This is our second and final rebuttal witness, Dr. Park Dietz. He did, Flashman knows this better than I do. I know he was a witness in Dahmer's trial, but I don't know which side he was for. I'm going to assume the state. But that's a complete assumption because I've not looked at it. I don't know anything about him. I assume the state is going to use him to paint Betty as normal, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the state's going to do with him. The defense, I could see him using him to paint her as somebody that broke, just was pushed to the edge, couldn't take it anymore. That sort of thing. I don't know what the state's going to do with him. I'll set her. Shinny, way better, thank you. Tupperware has been put back in the cabinet as I feel safe enough without it. Good. Oh, Yanduria. I did not learn to talk. I told you I would last week, and apparently I lied. Andrea Yates. Yes, now I remember you saying that was the other case, other trial. What's up, Sharon? How are you? Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Not a drama llama. Hello and welcome. I like your name and your picture. It's very cute. Jenny, you just make me laugh. Jenny says, look, I'm not normal, and I stepped away from the pew, so no way anyone should be saying Betty is normal without putting A, B in front of it. Good point. Okay, well, let's see what he has to say. If the little movement back here is Miss Rue, she can stay as long as she doesn't bark. She's the one you always hear barking in the background. So she came in, she laid down. I don't have the heart to move her unless she starts barking. And then if she does, she's got to go out the door. Carmen. Remember, for 15 months. Thank you so much for the whole tooth and nothing but the tooth. So help me, mod. Awesome. I do not have a pit bull, but it's a German Setter that needs brushed very badly, and I should have done that today, but I decided to take some time for myself, and I didn't. So probably Wednesday she'll get a good brushing because she's shedding as usual. She never stops, never ends. And that's why I call her the German Shedder. Not the Shedders, Shedder. She's a German Shepherd, but shedding season is, every season is shedding season for them. Always and forever, you can vacuum and turn around and vacuum again, and your vacuum will be full. So it's good times. She's out, so we'll leave her be. Ooh, white cat hair everywhere. My dad his cat has a lot of white on it, and yeah, he is a shedder. Well, I won't. If she doesn't give me crap, I won't talk crap. What's up, Puddletown? Betty told Dan, if we don't get remarried soon, I'm gonna unalive you. I said, I guess it's a matter of wife or death. Good one. Starting off strong. AT1, good to see you. Hope you are doing well. Or your Australian Shedder leaves more dogs behind than my German does. He stands there and watches me put the vac away and leaves two next to him in that time. I know. I know, it's like mine are a Great Dane, so short hair. I don't get the big, like, I don't look everywhere. I literally vacuum my kitchen with only the light of the vacuum cleaner because I can see all the little hair bunnies like trying to run away from me so I can wrangle them all up. And then I'm just like, it's just depressing. I'm like, I can't catch all these little jerks. Yes, you are, Town. They are not scary. You saw my dog here last week, Flashman. She wanted a hug. She's not scary. Anyway, back to Betty. Let's get going. We've got about an hour and 45 minutes worth of testimony tonight. And let's just go, shall we? And we even have the luxury of closed captionings that are always great.
Morning, Doctor. How are you? Morning. That table will fold down if you need more room there.
Thank you. And Doctor, could you please state your full name for the record and spell your last name?
My name is Park Elliott Dietz, Dietz.
Good morning, Dr. Dietz.
Good morning.
What is your profession?
I'm a psychiatrist, and I limit my practice to forensic psychiatry.
What is forensic psychiatry?
Forensic psychiatry is the application of the principles and practice of psychiatry to the purposes of law. In other words, it is psychiatry designed to be used for legal purposes, to try to answer legal questions.
Dr. Dietz, could you describe for the jury your education that prepared you for this?
Just before, so not a drama llama. This is from 1991. I apologize. This is Betty Broderick. This is her second trial. First trial ended in a mistrial, not because they couldn't decide on guilt or innocence. It was her level of guilt for unaliving her ex-husband and his new wife. So yes, it is a time capsule, but the audio is generally 1,000 times better than today's court audio, which should not be the case. Hello, Christine. How are you? Hope you had a good weekend. Always good to see you. Oh, sorry, Flashman. Just making sure. Was he in Mendez too? I don't know. He's, I think, been around. I think Dr. Dietz gets around. And he's, I'm okay. I'll just push play.
This sort of endeavor?
Certainly. I had my undergraduate education at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and there received a degree in 1970 in psychology and biology. In 1975, I received an MD degree, a Doctor of Medicine, from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in Baltimore. In the same year, I also received a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins. At that time, I'd done the coursework for a PhD, that is a Doctor of Philosophy in sociology, and years later, when I finished a dissertation, I received that PhD as well. But in 1975, I began my special training as a physician.
What additional training have you had, Doctor?
Well, I spent 2 years as an assistant resident in psychiatry at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. And then I spent a third year as resident in psychiatry and the chief fellow in forensic psychiatry at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And that was the end of my formal residency training.
Doctor, are you board certified in the practice of psychiatry?
Yes, I am.
What does that mean?
Well, board certification is a procedure for ensuring that those who hold themselves out for a particular specialty have met certain qualifications, and it requires proof of having done the necessary training and submitting to 2 examinations, a written exam and an oral exam.
Dr. Dietz, is there some sort of difference between psychiatrists and their training and psychologists and their training in this area of the practice of medicine?
Yes, there are.
What is that?
Well, one of the differences is that in psychiatry, one must first become a physician and go through medical training. And then the specific psychiatric training is obtained during a residency program treating patients in hospitals for 3 years. Whereas in psychology, it's a PhD program directed toward learning about psychology. And those who focus on clinical psychology will usually do an internship to get training in actually seeing or treating or evaluating patients. It's a different focus.
Dr. Dietz, could you tell the jurors what positions you've held and what they entail?
My first position after residency was as an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. I was based at the McLean Hospital, which is a private psychiatric hospital that Harvard operates. At least administratively, I was based there, but my assignment was at the Bridgewater State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, which is a maximum security institution operated by the Department of Correction. And the task was to try to turn this somewhat infamous institution into a Harvard teaching hospital. And I'm sorry to say it's a task at which we did not succeed, but we tried. My time there was 2 years actually working at this security hospital. And then I had the opportunity to spend my 3rd year at Harvard doing something rather unusual. I spent the entire year evaluating John Hinckley on behalf of the United States Attorney's Office in Washington in connection with the charges arising from his attempt to assassinate President Reagan. So for a year, he was my practice evaluating Mr. Hinckley and advising the government about him. I did a few research projects during that year as well, but he was really my practice. And then my 4th year at Harvard, I spent conducting research primarily on mentally disordered offenders, and had a subcontract from what had been a violence grant from the Justice Department to the University of Pennsylvania. And my work was focused on mentally disordered offenders who commit battery or who commit homicide. After those 4 years, I then accepted a position at the University of Virginia, which had invited me to become the medical director of its Institute of Law, Psychiatry, and Public Policy, which was a program operated, and still is, by the University of Virginia Law School and Medical School and by the Commonwealth of Virginia, and which helps draft legislation, which trains students in both law and medicine and the various health professions, and which operates a clinic, a forensic psychiatry clinic, where evaluations are conducted. And while I was at Virginia, I was half-time in the law school and half-time in the medical school, originally as an associate professor and later as a full professor of law, and also as a professor of behavioral medicine and psychiatry. I taught courses for law students on psychiatry and criminal law and on criminal behavior, on criminal violence. And in the medical school, I taught forensic psychiatry and trained fellows who are young psychiatrists in training to become forensic psychiatrists. And I was in charge of the evaluations conducted at the forensic psychiatry clinic for the university. I'd had a training program also at Harvard, a fellowship program, but it was smaller in scale than the one at Virginia. After having done that for 6 years, I took a sabbatical to conduct research and write, and moved to California at that time, and then didn't return to Virginia. Decided to time there. It's not a full-time job. And I also am a consultant regularly to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and to the New York State Police Forensic Sciences Unit. However, is spent as a consultant to law enforcement agencies and attorneys occasionally courts and corporations in matters dealing with aberrant behavior, most often criminal behavior.
Doctor, have you conducted any research in the field of psychiatry?
Yes, I have.
In what particular areas?
Well, all of my research has to do with the extremes of behavior. Primarily, it's antisocial behavior and criminal behavior of various kinds.
Have you published in the scientific literature?
Yes, I have.
And how does that differ, let's say, from writing magazine articles?
Well, for one thing, in the scientific literature, the purpose is to share research results rather than to entertain or to inform or the broader public. And so a portion of the scientific literature requires that one do rather thoughtful and careful research, and that the work that one submits for publication be reviewed by peers, people who have some knowledge of that field, and who decide whether it's acceptable to publish, whether the thinking is done well enough, whether the methods are accurate enough to warrant publication. Those are called peer-reviewed journals, and there's no payment for that, but it's considered an important part of one's career and an important contribution to make. It's how one contributes. There are other parts of the professional literature that aren't quite that way. People do get book royalties for some of their writings, but largely it's not done for the financial rewards, but to communicate and to show that one's leading to some greater understanding of an aspect of the world.
I take it you've published in these you've published peer review articles?
Yes, I have.
Have you written a number of books and reports?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that just briefly?
Well, I edited a book on psychotherapy some years back. I wrote a book on an odd way in which people manage to kill themselves. And I've written lengthy reports on mentally disordered offenders and on individuals who harass and stalk other people.
So you've written a book on suicide, is that correct?
On suicide? No.
Oh, I thought you said on the way people kill themselves.
Well, it's not exactly suicide.
Okay. Have you written any chapters in books published by other people or edited by other people?
Yes, perhaps 15.
And was one of these a chapter on patterns in human violence? It was included in the American Psychiatric Association annual review.
Yes.
Another one, defenses against dangerous people when arrest and commitment fail. I'm sorry. Defenses against dangerous people when arrest and commitment fail.
Yes.
And that was in the American Psychiatric Press Review of Clinical Psychiatry and the Law.
Yes.
And there are numerous other ones we probably don't want to take the time to get into.
Right.
Have you edited any professional publications?
Well, yes, I've edited some special issues of journals on violence or criminal behavior. And I've also been on the editorial boards of a number of journals, mostly in the forensic sciences and in psychiatry and law.
Have you done any lectures,
Yes.
both nationally and internationally?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
There are about 150 occasions when I've gone somewhere to give a special lecture or address at a national meeting or at someone's invitation to give a lecture somewhere. That's not including the teaching that's been my job.
And have you ever testified in a court of law as an expert witness before?
Yes, I have.
In which particular states?
I think it is 40 or 45 states that I've testified in. I haven't done the Dakotas. There are a couple others.
Would this be both civil and criminal cases that you testified in?
Yes.
In the area of criminal case testimony, approximately how many times have you testified?
In the trial phase, I believe it's been hundreds, but I don't have any accurate way to count.
Are you hired just by the defense or just by the prosecution?
No.
Let's say the last two cases, who did you testify for?
The last two were both for the defense.
Have you also been employed by the defense and prosecution in various states as a consultant where you didn't testify?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned the John Hinckley case. Are there a few other just notable cases that you can tell the jury about that you testified in?
Yes, there are.
Did you have something to do with the Tylenol tampering situation?
I was involved originally in an investigative capacity on behalf of the FBI, but later I became involved on behalf of Johnson & Johnson and did testify in that connection.
What about the Robert Chambers case?
I had a small role in that. The district attorney's office in Manhattan consulted me, and I was prepared to testify if the need arose.
What was that about?
That's the one that became known as the Preppy murders.
Arthur Shawcross, did you have any connection with his case?
Yes, I did.
What was that, please?
I evaluated him and testified in his trial. That was a serial killer case in upstate New York.
And was there a case involving Soldier of Fortune magazine you were involved in?
Yes,
What was that about?
that was a lawsuit in connection with a murder of a Texas housewife that had been commissioned through a classified advertisement in Soldier of Fortune magazine in which a man was offering to commit crimes for hire.
And was there a rather recent case involving a federal judge being killed by a bomb?
Yes, that's the Roy Moody case. Mr. Moody has now been convicted of having sent mail bombs to NAACP offices in 2 locations, and to a civil rights lawyer who died as a result of it, to a federal judge, appellate court judge who died as a result. And I worked on that case for the Justice Department.
What was your connection with that case?
The special prosecutors for the U.S. Department of Justice asked me originally to help investigate the case. And later, I had a role of evaluating Mr. Hinckley and testifying for the government at his trial.
Now, were you hired by the people to evaluate the mental condition of the defendant in this case?
Yes.
What does a psychiatrist such as yourself look for in making such an evaluation?
Well, it depends on the specific question that's asked, but the general areas that are inquired into when there's a question of whether someone has any mental disorder is to determine whether the individual suffers from any of the mental diseases, mental illnesses on the one hand, and also to look at whether there are any patterns in their behavior of a kind that we recognize get people into various kinds of difficulties. So the principal focus is to look for mental disease on the one hand and to look for maladaptive patterns of behavior on the other.
Did you find in this case any evidence of mental disease or illness?
No, I did not find evidence of mental disease or mental illness.
What did you find?
I found a great deal of evidence consistent with opinions that others had reached, that Mrs. Broderick suffers from a personality disorder.
And just generally, what do you mean when you say personality disorder?
Well, a personality disorder is a lifelong pattern of behavior in which the individual responds to the world in particular ways. There are various personality disorders that have been described. We have a classification of them. It's one that changes from time to time when we update the classification system. But there's some consensus among mental health professionals as to the ways in which to describe the kinds of personalities that get people into problems. Each of the personality disorders represents a persistent pattern of behaving that either causes the person some distress, that is, that they're never happy enough, or else causes problems for those around them. And these can be serious enough to lead people to get fired from jobs, or to lead to divorce, or to lead to being thrown out of school, or to lead to being put in jail. It depends on the circumstances what happens, but they are persistent patterns of behaving. And those are recognized as being quite different from mental illnesses. In mental illnesses, individuals have kinds of symptoms that are different from what ordinary humans experience. In the mental illnesses, individuals have symptoms that people do not normally have any semblance of, such as hearing voices that aren't present, or seeing things that aren't there, or believing that the CIA is implanting electrodes in one's teeth. Those are things that normal people don't think are happening to them. Only if they're on drugs or mentally ill do they have those experiences. The personality disorders, on the other hand, are very much like things that we see in everyday life. And nothing that occurs to people with personality disorders mentally is fundamentally different from the rest of human experience. But rather, they have these patterns of acting that cause problems for themselves or others.
Now, Doctor, in reaching this opinion, did you review any material
Yes,
that was provided to you by the prosecution?
yes.
And before me on let's say, my side of the desk here, is that the material that you reviewed in preparation for rendering an opinion in this case?
Those 3 stacks of material and a little more that I have here are materials that my office received and which were reviewed by my associate and me in preparing this case.
Did you review the police reports in this case
Yes,
and the prosecution investigative reports
yes,
and the defense investigation reports
yes,
and the psychological testing of the defendant that was done between, I think, 1986 and 1990?
that's right.
And the prior psychological reports that were generated on the defendant between 1983 and 1990?
Yes,
The divorce trial transcript, did you review that?
yes,
And the depositions of Doctors DeVos and Nelson that were taken about a year or a month before the killings?
yes,
And the other various files, documents that were filed in the divorce case?
yes,
Did you review the defendant's marriage encounter notebook
yes,
and this book or manuscript that she wrote in February of 1988?
yes,
Her diaries
yes,
and a transcript of her prior trial testimony in the first trial
yes,
and the testimony of all the psychiatric experts that testified in the first trial
yes,
and the testimony of both the defendant's daughters, Lee and Kim Broderick, that testified in the first trial.
yes,
Did you review anything in the present trial in terms of the trial testimony transcripts?
yes.
Did you review the defendant's testimony, both direct and cross-examination?
I haven't read all of her cross-examination from this trial because of the timing of receiving the transcripts, but I've read most of it.
Did you review the testimony of Dr. DeFrancesca?
Yes.
Now, as we can see, that's quite a bit of material. How was it that Dr. Lippian helped you with this?
Well, originally, Dr. Lippian, who is my associate, met with both Mr. Burkhoff and Ms. Wells to discuss what the timing of the case would be, to look at what sorts of issues might be raised, and then to request what documents and materials we wanted to look at. At that initial meeting, I had the opportunity to review photographs as well, and I directed Dr. Lippian to begin reviewing some of the documents while I reviewed others of them, and asked him to prepare summaries for me of particular documents illustrating certain features and to call to my attention anything of any psychiatric significance. And we then went through a process whereby we were able to get through this large quantity of material and to extract from it everything of psychiatric significance and to formulate some preliminary opinions about the case. These we discussed, and I went back and looked at original documents where there was any question of what had been going on. And the end product of that was to form opinions that are specific to this case and which are supported by the evidence.
Is Dr. Lippian another psychiatrist?
Yes, he is.
And he associates with you and works closely with you on cases such as this?
That's right.
Now, did you have the opportunity to personally interview the defendant in this case?
No, I did not.
Did you, however, review other things instead of interviewing the defendant?
Correct.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, besides the documents that I've already mentioned, which include, of course, many descriptions about Mrs. Broderick's behavior by mental health professionals, by family members, and by others. And besides reading what she's written and had to say, I also had occasion to observe her testimony for a portion of this trial, for a morning that I came and observed her testify. I've had occasion to see her testimony in a videotaped segment from the previous trial. And I had occasion to consult with Dr. Goldsband, who had examined the defendant in connection with the preceding trial.
Do you know Dr. Goldsband and his qualifications?
Yes, I know him very well.
And what is your opinion of Dr. Goldsband?
I hold it.
Sustained.
Did you listen to any audio tapes that were part of this case?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell us about that?
Yes, I listened to the audio tapes that are within these materials that are conversations between the defendant and Rhett, or the defendant and Danny, or that are taped messages left on the answering machine at their home. And I've listened to those and also have reviewed transcripts of those messages.
Do you feel that the lack of this personal interview with the defendant limits you, in your opinion, under these circumstances?
Well, I think that not having an interview does limit in some ways what areas one can form opinions about. I wouldn't be in a position to talk about her mental state at certain times after the crime when I might otherwise have seen her. But I don't think it limits my ability to talk about her personality or whether she had diseases or her general mental condition in the past.
No,
because in this case, there's so much other evidence.
the things we just talked about.
Yes.
Why would that other evidence be better than talking to the defendant, let's say, a couple of years after the killings?
Well, it isn't always better to have old documentary evidence, but sometimes it is. One advantage, of course, is that there are contemporaneous observations in those records that reflect what happened at the time, as opposed to someone's recounting of it sometime later. Another issue, of course, is that people charged with serious crimes do not always tell the truth. And so having observations from many people, especially those who were witnesses more proximal to events, is at least important and often a better source of information than defendants themselves.
Now, is there a difference between a clinical and a forensic evaluation?
Yes, there is.
Can you tell us the difference, please?
Well, a clinical evaluation is one done for purposes of treating someone, whereas a forensic evaluation is done for purposes of answering some question that the law asks. In the clinical evaluation, the historical truth, it does not matter so much. What matters is how patients perceive, how they feel, what they think, and what can be done to help them. That's the therapist's goal, is to help the patient. In the forensic evaluation, the goal of the evaluator is to find out the truth about some specific question of interest to the law, how people felt or what they need in the future or what can help them in the future is not relevant. It's not the point, except insofar as those things can help explain what happened at those times that are of interest to the law. So the central difference is that the clinical exam is for the purpose of helping people. Clinical evaluation is for that purpose. Forensic evaluation is not for that purpose. It's not to help them. It's to help legal decision makers find out the truth about events.
Dr. Goldsman's evaluation of the defendant, you spoke to him about that?
Yes, I did.
Is that a clinical or a therapeutic evaluation?
Dr. Goldsman did a forensic evaluation.
I'm sorry, it's a forensic versus a clinical evaluation. Is that correct?
That's right.
Can you tell us whether or not you agree with and adopt Dr. Goldsman's opinion of the defendant's mental condition?
Yes, I agree with his central opinions and do adopt those and rely on his diagnosis.
What is that you're adopting?
Dr. Goldsman diagnosed the defendant as having what he termed a mixed personality disorder with narcissistic and histrionic features. I think I would have phrased it rather differently, but it's the same point, which is narcissistic personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. He also pointed out that there were times that she was depressed, and I think that that's correct.
Doc?
Thank you.
Want to take a drink there?
Of water.
I'm glad you added that. Doctor, what is a narcissistic personality?
Well, a narcissistic personality disorder, a narcissistic personality is an individual who is very full of himself or herself, that is prideful, very focused on being important, needing to be admired and respected by other people, and who has certain attributes which can become problematic in life. Where they do, then it's known as a narcissistic personality disorder. In that situation, where it is a narcissistic personality disorder, the central characteristics really are three. The first is that the individual tends to have what people would commonly refer to as a swollen ego, a big ego. The technical language for that is someone who has a sense of grandiosity. The second characteristic is that such people really can't recognize how other people feel about things and we call that a lack of empathy. It's not quite the same as not having sympathy. It's not being able to see it through the other fellow's eyes, not being able to feel or recognize what other people would feel. And the third characteristic is being thin-skinned about criticism, which we refer to as hypersensitivity to the evaluation of others. And each of the formal features of narcissistic personality disorder can be understood as reflecting that swelled ego or thin skin or not being able to feel what other people will.
Doctor, how does a psychiatrist know what to look for in determining whether or not somebody has a narcissistic personality disorder?
Well, different clinicians and experts will do this in different ways, but the agreed upon language that we share is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Classification. That's a book that's published by the American Psychiatric Association, in which the various mental disorders are classified. Both the diseases are in there and the personality disorders. And the book provides a description of how people behave who have the different kinds of disorders. And it also gives specific criteria. That is, it lists those things that must be there before the diagnosis can be given. Now, not everyone follows this book, which is sort of a rule book for making diagnosis. And there are flaws in this book, but it is the agreed upon way to do it. And until the next edition comes out, it's the accepted standard for making diagnoses and for recognizing these patterns.
What are the diagnostic criteria that you're aware of that a psychiatrist would look at determining whether or not somebody has a narcissistic personality disorder?
The criteria that DSM-3R, the revised 1987 edition, give for the disorder are first, that an individual reacts to criticism with feelings of rage, shame, or humiliation. This is the thin-skinned issue that I mentioned, that when criticized or rejected or not given enough praise even, such individuals can become furious. They can feel terribly ashamed and be devastated in that way. They respond strongly and emotionally to anything that they see as criticism or rejection. The second is that they are interpersonally exploitive. Actually, it says exploitative. And that means that in their dealings with other people, they use people to meet their own needs. The third is that they have a grandiose sense of self-importance, which is what I referred to as the swelled ego in common parlance. The fourth is that they believe that their problems are unique and can only be understood by other special people, so that they think that because they're so special, regardless of whether they really are people of achievement, they think they should be treated that way, regardless of whether they're particularly kind or good or decent people. They still expect to be seen as special and treated that way, not to have to wait in line, not to have to do what other people have to do. Fifth characteristic is that they are preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success or power or brilliance or beauty or ideal love, meaning that they often spend their time thinking about what they want, how it should be, how it will someday be. The sixth is described as a sense of entitlement or the unreasonable expectation of especially favorable treatment. There again, the notion is the world owes me respect or a living or money or fame or whatever the person's desires are. They think it should be handed to them rather than earned. They feel entitled to it. And the seventh is requiring constant attention and admiration, feeling badly if they're not being admired or attended to. The eighth is lacking empathy, which I've already described. And the ninth feature is being preoccupied with feelings of envy, so that they're often thinking of how much more somebody else has than they have. Now, those 9 features are all 9 of the characteristics that may occur in people who have this disorder, but we only
Doctor, in your review of all this case material here in front of us, did you find facts to support a finding as to each of these diagnostic criteria regarding the defendant?
Yes, in this case, I found evidence to support all 9 of the 9.
Just approximately, how many supporting facts did you find?
Too many to count.
Okay. Could you give us some of the facts that you pulled from the case materials that show the defendant has a narcissistic personality disorder?
Well, with respect to the first criterion I mentioned of reacting to criticism overly strongly, one example is that in her book manuscript, Mrs. Broderick talks about a period when she first suspected that Dan was having an affair, and she wrote, "My great friends were with me all the way. They saw the drastic change in my personality. My health was suffering. I was a shaking, crying, nervous wreck." Now, that's an indication that even at the beginning, when she suspected there was an affair, she responded dramatically and emotionally with profound sense that she was physically a wreck and psychologically a wreck, that it began even with those suspicions. And of course, losing one's husband in an affair or feeling that that's happening is perceived as an important sense of rejection. So that's quite a criticism for someone who's narcissistic to begin with, to think that their husband's cheating.
You see any other facts that you'd like to tell us about?
In supporting the same example, there are other things in her writings where she shows herself to be becoming enraged when she's criticized. But the most dramatic examples are of kind that rise to the level one might call narcissistic rage. This is a familiar phenomenon to mental health professionals of what happens when someone who's narcissistic is insulted or rejected. Examples from her past include throwing things at Dan, locking him out of the house, criticizing him in front of other people. Those are all ways she would respond when her pride was wounded. Grabbing people by the arm and digging in her fingernails, kicking Kim and Lee out of the house. These are rageful acts, as are the obscene phone calls, burning the clothes, the vandalism at Coral Reef, bashing her truck into Dan's front door at Cypress, lighting the fire on the carpet at Coral Reef, the repeated homicidal threats.
Excuse me, doctor. She bumped it. She bumped his front door. Meow was on purpose. Sorry, Final 10. I was wondering, like, if you didn't say it on purpose, it was perfect. So, but purpose. Oh my goodness. All right. I said, I'm actually, this guy's more interesting than I thought he was going to be. I was kind of dreading this. And he's not qualified if he thinks she bumped it. AJ stopped saying she didn't bump it. She went through the house, out the backyard, flung the kids out of the sunroof to the kitchen table to eat dinner, and then drove through the backyard, allegedly. Hello, Beth Works On. You just watched the Meredith Baxter Bernie movie the other day. That one, probably because it's the first one I saw when this trial originally happened, was my favorite. Between that one and the Dirty John one. But welcome, Beth. It was just a fit of redecoration. Get it right, doctor. No, it was not a warrant, cop knock, and a slight gentle boop boop. No. Pedal down. Yes, Dog Mom, you can be yourself here 100%. We judge not. What's up, Sticky? How you doing? How you doing? Oh my goodness. Okay. Like I said, I was kind of dreading this dude, but he's interesting. Also, when he was going through those 9 things, I was like, I know somebody like this. It's not myself, but I was like, I always thought this about them. Thanks for confirming it, Doctor. His eyes are like perfect triangles. His eyebrows. I can't. Like, I don't know. I've never seen eyebrows naturally like that. But men generally, nowadays, men will, take care of their eyebrows and stuff like beards and all that more. But not then. Not then. So I mean, is that natural? I'm confused.
All of these reflect the narcissistic rage of one who perceives a severe criticism of her. And this went on for years.
Are narcissists always angry?
Not 100% of the time, even when they are being at their most rageful. And not all narcissists get angry at all.
When they do get angry, do they get more angry than other people?
It can be severe anger. What's more likely to happen is that it will last longer and that the anger will be disproportionate to what originally provoked it.
When you say it would be disproportionate to what originally provoked it, can you kind of elaborate on that, please?
Well, sure. Given the same insult of, let's say, someone's clothing is insulted by someone whose opinion one values, the normal response is not to feel very good about that for the rest of the day, perhaps, or the rest of the party, and to wonder why they made such a cutting comment. But somebody who's narcissistic may never forgive that comment, may never want to talk to that person again, will write them off as a friend. It's out of proportion. The anger is more intense and the reaction is more intense.
You said something that they would hold on to that anger for some time. Could you explain that?
Depending on the nature of the event to which they're responding, an individual can bear narcissistic rage indefinitely. People can cut off members of their family because they've been offended by them, can never go back to employment where they were once humiliated, can do rather drastic things because of the intolerability of owning up to the rejection or the criticism or the shame of it all as they feel it.
Going back to the remaining diagnostic criteria that you talked about, did you see other facts in the defendant's case file materials that you reviewed that support a finding that she was a narcissistic personality disorder?
The second heading is being interpersonally exploitive. Some examples of that are the way in which Mrs. Broderick manipulated the children in her quest for vengeance, the way she would drop them off at their father's, making them feel that they were being punished. Statements that she made, such as, if I'm not going to be Mrs. Daniel T. Broderick, he can take care of the kids. Or statements such as, see what woman wants him with 4 kids. Those are indicative of using the children as pawns for what she thought was a higher purpose of revenge. Or, and by the way, those things also illustrate the lack of empathy. That is, that instead of thinking about how this will affect the children, how it will make them feel, the more important thing to her is gaining revenge against Dan. That's corroborated by the tapes, by the statements the children made to therapists, by the testimony of the daughters even before the homicides. And the tapes show this repeatedly.
Is there any one particular tape conversation that comes to mind when you think about the tapes?
Well, one is the conversation between Mrs. Broderick and her son, Rhett, where she says, Rhett, I hate to tell you this, but you got to learn to stick up for yourself and you got to speak up to Daddy. I'm quoting her. She said, Daddy and the cunt. He's killing you all. He's ruining your lives and killing you, and you've got to speak up and fight back. And Rhett said, I'm not dead. Mrs. Broderick then said, yeah, well, maybe you're not dead physically, but emotionally you're dead. You don't have anyone that loves you or cares about you over there, and he mistreats you. Treats you like a little piece of shit. And he's a cold-hearted bastard fucking an office cunt. What kind of a parent is that? Rhett replied, a cold one. Mrs. Broderick said, "Bad one, very, 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 very bad one. And you shouldn't put up with it anymore. You should tell him to fuck off. You and Lily and Danny should say, 'Fuck off, asshole,' and come over here. Tell him to drop dead and go away. And then you'd be happy over here, right?" Well, that conversation and others like it illustrate many points about Mrs. Broderick's personality. But one of them is the interpersonal exploitiveness of using the children to gain revenge. Another one is the lack of empathy that it shows. Another is a kind of exaggeration that I'll discuss when I mention the histrionic features, where she talks about
A, a banner of bad words, Carmen. Sorry. You want me to tell them to stop saying bad words? YouTube actually changed their rules, and they don't care so much about them anymore. They're coming around, I guess, a little. Yeah, she gave up on the kids. I like how he started reading that and then he stopped before he got to Dan and the "see you next Tuesday." Because he's like, "These are her words, not mine." I did not call into that. Oh. Carmen, you are so full of it right now. So full of it. Sorry, there might be some language. Yes, like Gabby there. You guys are unaliving me with these things. Okay, there might be some language. Sorry, I didn't say it.
very, very, very. Whenever people use phrases like very, 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 you've got a clue that they might be about to exaggerate.
What about the grandiose sense of self-importance that you mentioned as one of the diagnostic criteria? Did you see any facts in the case file that reflected that in the defendant?
Yes. One example was telling Kim that when she divorced Dan, she was going to marry the Prince of Saudi Arabia next because he'd buy her everything she wanted. I see it as grandiose to have said that the guy asked me to marry him every day for 3 years, or to say I finally married him, meaning Dan, out of pity. He wanted me so bad. Those are all grandiose sorts of statements. Yet another is from Mrs. Broderick's book manuscript written in February of '88, where she wrote, "Let me tell you about my optimism. I am a very up and forgiving, friendly person. I try not to dwell on disappointment or unhappiness and try to make the best of things and go on. This trait of mine is very valuable to others. It is very uplifting and encouraging and happy. I am a great wife and mother, teacher and friend because of it. I am always positive and happy." Now, that's a grandiose statement about her. That is, it inflates, at least to some extent, the value and worth and extent of these traits. And besides that, of course, it's inconsistent with the claim that she was suicidal when she wrote that. Another example was Mrs. Broderick frequently stating to other people that she had a gun and was going to kill Dan and Linda, and rationalizing that when she did so, she wouldn't get in any trouble for it because she'd be let off as a grandiose view that because she's so important, accountable.
What about the next diagnostic criteria? Did you find anything under that reflected in the case files that shows the defendant was a narcissistic personality disorder?
Yes, the fourth characteristic is that of believing one's problems are unique and can only be understood by other special people. In her diary, she shows that she believes no one else understands how much she goes through. Also, in a letter that she drafted to Judge Joseph, there's a statement in which she indicated that she thought that homicide would be justifiable if she didn't get her own way. And then she crossed out that statement. That, too, shows her sense of having special problems. She wrote, if he is trying to build a case for justifiable homicide, he is doing a great job.
What about under the next diagnostic criteria?
The fifth is the preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. And with respect to that criterion, one example is a passage in her diary where she refers to hers as, quote, one of the world's nicest families, end quote. Again, putting the notion that it is not just good or fine or promising or special, but one of the best in the world. That's what makes it a sign of this disorder. The sixth criterion is having a sense of entitlement, the expectation that others will treat one specially. And here, again, there are many examples. One of the most telling is from December of 1987, where at Christmas, Mrs. Broderick wrote in her diary a list of the things that she felt entitled to, but of which she thought she was being deprived. She wrote, my lifestyle has been trashed. No tree, no one to help carry it in, load the car, etc. No one to see it, no party, no kids, no attic, no coffee table, no country club memberships, no boat for parade of lights, no jag, only truck, no escort, no parties, no gowns, no presents by or for me, no ski party, no ski trip, no large party, no money. Now, that passage is one of a number that show something of Mrs. Broderick's priorities. And I think it's relevant to point out that that was the same Christmas that she had the opportunity to have the children, but wouldn't take them because Dan wouldn't give her $6,000 for a ski trip. At the same time,
Sure. Take our noon recess at this time, but before we do, I should have mentioned this to you earlier, Mr. Schmidt. If you want to move over to the more comfortable chair after the noon recess, that's fine. It's up to you. But that one swivels, the one you're in doesn't, so it may be more comfortable for you. Please remember the admonition, ladies and gentlemen, not to discuss the case among yourselves, nor allow anyone else to discuss it with you, nor form any opinions till it's finally submitted to you. See you at 1:30. You proceed, Mr. Burkhoff.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Dietz, I think we were, when we adjourned before lunchtime on the seventh criteria, diagnostic criteria for narcissistic disorder. And that talks about requiring constant attention and admiration. Did you find any facts as to that in your review of the case file?
yes.
Please tell us about that.
Well, for example, in the marriage encounter book that was written in November of 1976, there are three of the statements Mrs. Broderick wrote that I think are examples of that. One is her statement, quote, I feel like no one admires me and I need that, end quote. That is a need for admirations, understood and expressed. A second is, she wrote, the number one thing I loved about you was how much you loved me. And then she added, and showed it. The point there is that what she loved most about Dan was how much he loved her. It's the reflected glory that she received from Dan that she found particularly attractive about him. And thirdly, she was answering a question as to the 5 things that she liked best about Dan and herself. And what one of the 5 things she listed was, people seem to envy us. And that again reflects the desire, the need for being admired and receiving attention from others. A later example is the way Mrs. Broderick described her feelings of being exploited by her own children when they didn't give her enough presents or enough attention. She wrote in a diary entry dated January 3rd, 1988, quote, I'm very sick of my kids always taking advantage of my sweetness and generosity and getting nothing in return. No Christmas presents, no visits unless they want money, no love, end quote.
What about the 8th criteria, lack of empathy?
Yes, there's a great deal of evidence to support that as well.
Do you have any particular factual instances you'd like to tell us about?
Yes, among them are the nonchalance that Mrs. Broderick conveyed about the effects of dumping her children at their father's door. That is, her lack of concern about the effect that would have on them. With that, as with the obscene messages, she simply wouldn't. She refused to be influenced by the opinions of others. People had told her, and repeatedly, that this was not good for the kids, but that didn't prevent her from doing those. She seemed to be oblivious to the effects that this would have on them, even after she was warned about it. In one of the conversations recorded with Danny, for example, she says, "I'm too embarrassed to even tell anybody I know you guys," which is the kind of thing that she was capable of understanding would be harmful to a child, and that she'd been told not to do things like that. She's an intelligent woman who has better sense than that. She even acknowledged having read many books on divorce, and of course they talk about the effects on the children of this kind of behavior, but it was more important to her to hurt Dan and Linda than to prevent the possible harms to the children. Another example is from a statement that Mrs. Broderick made to Dr. Nelson in February of '87 about Rhett. Dr. Nelson quoted her as saying, "I don't want to care for him. If I do 10 more years of childcare and not take care of myself, I'll end up with nothing. Rhett will have to go back to Dan and do the best he can. I have to take care of myself." That, like the other examples, reflects her priorities and indicates.
So, Beth, he was talking about one that she wrote in '88, and I think Betty testified to that on the stand, if I remember correctly, that she wrote a book or what have you. So, because she was going to take her own life, and she wanted something for her kids, basically, to be able to read about her, because that's what we would do, I guess. And then in 2023, apparently she released another book from prison. I was looking for, I think it's called Until the 12th of Never, which apparently is not in print anymore. I was looking for that on Audible, and her book from 2023 came up, and it's called Telling on Myself. It is, I have not listened to it because the reviews on it said the AI voice was horrible. So then I continued to read the reviews. Some still 100% support Betty. Some say they would have done it sooner. And some say that she left out a lot of what we learned in the trial. So I'm kind of like, yeah, no kidding. That she left out. She wasn't telling on herself at all. She was still blaming Dan, blaming Linda, and making herself look good as she can. Dog Mom, I will say that she did go through some BS with him. He probably did make her feel inadequate after she got older and had children, but the way she solved it was completely extra and over the top. 100%. 100%. I agree with you. I've never said Dan and Linda are innocent in this. I've said they are all three horrible. She was just the most horrible in the worst way. And this is where she's at. And she still will not take responsibility for it. So they keep denying her parole. She just can't say, yeah, that was wrong. You're welcome, Beth. Yeah, she just couldn't. She could not walk away. She could not. So hopefully StreamYard will behave. I know it's not just been my stream. I cannot. If I could fix it, I would. But they've been doing stuff to it, and they need to stop. You get it working, and then you're like, let's do something else. She tain't deserving of parole. Puddletown, you are never gonna. If you saw Betty ever, if you ever had a conversation with Betty, that would be the one thing you brought up to her. That'd be like first. Wag my finger at it. Shame, shame. Stop it, StreamYard. Stop it. Justice for Dan's taint on behalf of all men.
That she is not as sensitive to the needs of other people as to her own, and that's what's described as a lack of empathy.
And Dr., the last criteria for narcissism, the preoccupation with feelings of envy, did you find any facts in the case file to support those,
Yes.
that diagnostic criteria? Please tell us about that.
Well, again, so some examples out of many are Mrs. Broderick's children saying that if they did anything with their father and Linda, their mother would be furious, calling them traitors and worse. But then later, she'd want to know every detail about what had gone on in Dan and Linda's life. And that's also confirmed by many of her friends and by Dan's housekeepers, that she wants to know what they're doing. Likewise, in a taped message, Mrs. Broderick revealed something of the connection between her preoccupation with feelings of envy and her desire for revenge when she said, and I quote, "I close my eyes and I see you in the cunt, and I see you doing all your wonderful things, and you're going to be so sorry," end quote. That's reflective of her preoccupation, that she would fantasize repeatedly about such a thing, and that preoccupation with it, thinking about them together, was associated with her feelings of revenge, as she threatens they'll be sorry. Yet another example is that what occurred at the attempted mediation with Dr. Ruth Roth, it was clear from that Mrs. Broderick was so envious of Linda that it was more important to her to obtain revenge than to be able to keep the children. Dr. Roth quoted her as saying, quote, "I'm not going to be the single mother of 4 kids. I've already told you that. He will die first. I'm not letting go of him that easy. The little was mine and he will stay mine," end quote. That reflects envy.
Now, taking the general population as a whole, is the narcissistic personality disorder that uncommon?
No, there are not accurate data on what proportion of the population suffers it, but we know it's common. I mean, you can find it in the floor of the Senate, in any legislative hallway, in any TV newsroom, in any dugout for a major league team. Narcissism is an attribute among many people, including those who are successful, who enjoy the limelight and are prideful about it and see themselves as special and more important than other people. So it's something we all run across this in our everyday lives too, when we find people who expect special favors, who don't expect to have to do things the ordinary way. They expect shortcuts and special attention. It's not a rare condition. Most of the time we don't even notice it because it's so prevalent and such an important facet of everyday life that we don't even recognize it as abnormal most of the time we're with people who are narcissistic.
Okay. Let's shift gears for a second, go to another area. What is a histrionic personality, Doctor?
Histrionic personality refers to, in the lesser form, traits, or in the more troublesome form, a disorder in which individuals are primarily characterized, and again, this is from DSM-3R, which tries to give the essential features of each condition. A pervasive pattern of being too emotional, that is, in the technical words, excessive emotionality, and being attention-seeking, which means what it sounds like, people who try to get attention. So those are the 2 essential ingredients. Now, as with the narcissistic personality disorder, there are a number of different characteristics listed, 8 specifically. And before someone's given the diagnosis of having the histrionic personality disorder, one must find that they have at least 5 of the 8 characteristics that are listed. And moreover, before it's called a disorder, it either has to trouble them that they have these needs and wants and behaviors, or else it has to interfere with how they get along with other people.
What are the 8 diagnostic criteria that you just talked about?
Actually, I don't have all 8 of them at hand. I only have at hand the ones that I thought there was evidence for in this case.
How many are those?
5.
Why don't we go with those?
Those 5.
Carmen, thank you for the gifted membership. That one's Ada. Ada K, who's on vacation. Thank you very much. And June, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. Coons 44, Donna Marie Zimmerman, Ruthie. Hello, it's Britt and Sir Frank Otter all received Gifted memberships from June. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that from both of you. Very nice. Yes, he said histrionic. I don't know what you heard, Flashman. Don't answer. I was trying to, that was like the perfect storm. My phone was ringing. I was trying to get to Carmen's membership. Then I saw June and nothing would work. I was pressing all the things. By the time I went to answer my phone, it was gone. Whatever. That was fun. That was fun.
5R expresses emotion with inappropriate exaggeration. For example, having temper tantrums. This refers to the tendency to overreact to things, to show too much emotion in response to whatever the events really call for, and to be constantly making things out to be more than they are. That is, this constant tendency to exaggerate, usually in some emotional direction, and often, as it turns out, for the purpose of having a particular impact on the audience.
Doctor, did you note any particular facts in your review of all the case material here that supported a finding under criteria 4?
Oh, yes.
Please tell us about that.
Well, some examples are statements that Mrs. Broderick has made that are emotional statements in which, for emotional reasons, something is inappropriately exaggerated, such as her statement, "I was turned out into the street penniless by my husband." Or her statement, "Dan Broderick kidnapped my children and held them hostage for 4 years." Or, "I was getting bludgeoned. In fact, I considered it a gang rape by what was going on." That referred to the press and the public not being allowed in the courtroom during the dissolution proceedings. Or another one was her statement, "I really don't know what you mean as a narcissistic marriage." This is in response to a letter she'd received. If this is a story at all, it's a story of total corruption of the local legal system. "I was gang raped by the Bar Association for 5 years. Half of them helped their friend Dan Broderick break the laws to destroy me. The other half turned their backs on me and wouldn't help me get any legal representation." Or her statement, "I was terminated as a mother," from her testimony in this trial. Or her statement that she'd received a threatening letter from Dan, when the letter, which still exists, actually shows that he was saying that if she didn't let him know what furniture she wanted, he would sell it. Now, each of those is an exaggeration from the actual meaning of events, sometimes using very colorful metaphors, which of course attract a lot of attention, but it's not an accurate historical account of what happened with bludgeoning and gang rape and kidnapping and so on.
What about the diagnostic criteria that the defendant is comfortable in situations in which he or she is not, well, that a narcissistic person is, that histrionic person is uncomfortable in situations in which he or she is not the center of attention? Did you find any indicia of that in your review of the case file?
Yes, that's the second histrionic feature that I think is supported amply by the evidence. Here the point is this need for attention and being the center of attention. And in that way, it's like the narcissistic trait of needing attention and admiration. It's phrased a little differently. And here it's phrased that the person's uncomfortable if they're not the center of attention. But it's not so different. An example of this is provided in something that Mrs. Broderick wrote that shows how part of her gratification in the marriage came from the attention that came to her as a result of being Mrs. Daniel Broderick, and the ability that being married to him gave her to have lavish and extravagant parties. She wrote, "In 1983, we were on top of the world. Our home was almost completely decorated by me, and I was so proud of how it looked. We had money for maids, cars, trips, clothes, etc. We not only attended charity affairs, but we were able to host full tables and invite our friends." Well, that reflects her sense of loss, as she wistfully recalls this, of having been the center of attention, because it's uncomfortable to her not to be able to be in that position. And also, many of Mrs. Broderick's friends noted that what upset her after the divorce wasn't the emotional loss of Dan as a person, but really the loss of social status, because she had had quite high status in that marriage. Still another example comes from a description of a party that Mrs. Broderick went to. This is written after the separation, about December 5th of 1987, the Learn Allow party. She wrote, "Besides being fat and having no money to bid in the auction, I am so broken-hearted. I have no personality when talking to people. I have nothing fun and positive to talk about, like new furs and jewels, trips, home remodels, kids, etc." Again, mourning the loss of being the center of attention and of being able to play that role that she enjoyed, which gratified her.
Dr. Dietz, what about the next criteria, which has to do with displaying rapidly shifting and shallow expressions of emotion? Did you note any facts in the case file to support that criteria?
Yes, there's quite a bit to indicate that Mrs. Broderick's emotions quickly move from one to the next. She can shift between moods rapidly and shift back just as rapidly. The diaries have many entries about times that she was upset for a day or two, or depressed for a day or two, or worried for a day or two, or angry over and over and over, and not usually just for a day or two with anger. Toward the children, she even shows these kinds of shifts between loving the children and being very proud of them and pleased with them, to, for some quite temporary reason, being furious with them and wanting to disown them, being hostile or condemning them and calling them names. And you can even hear this even in the course of a single conversation, where she goes from sounding the loving mother to sounding very angry with the child or willing to use the child, back to being more motherly. The shifts happen quickly, and they don't stay in place for long, nor do they reflect any central change in how she sees people. It's just this constant fluttering of emotions. Another example is the way she's disowned long-term friends or family members, or at least temporarily said she'd done so, because they wouldn't side with her in her hatred toward Dan and Linda.
What about the next criteria, having to do with actions being directed towards obtaining immediate satisfaction and having no tolerance and a frustration for delayed gratification?
Well, that's the technical language DSM-3R uses. It's referred to as being self-centered in the list of criteria. It's something that's more familiar to people as the way children behave, where they want what they want when they want it. They want it right now. They have to have their needs met immediately. Mrs. Broderick even wrote in 1976 a statement quite along those lines. This is in her marriage encounter book, where she wrote, "I hate to have people tell me to do things. I like to do what I feel like when I feel like."
And as to the last criteria, having a style of speech that's excessively impressionistic and lacking in detail, did you find any facts to support that criteria?
Yes, I actually have already given some examples of how her speech is vague and does not focus on details of things. She paints with a broad and colorful brush designed to achieve an effect on the listener, and without much concern for the details of what's being said or the historical truth of what's being said. So she will sometimes speak out of emotion about how she felt without concern for the fact that the words she used aren't about what really happened. They're about how she felt. I gave you some examples before of these sorts of colorful word pictures, talking about herself as homeless or penniless, or the kids having been held hostage, or Dan having kidnapped them, or being gang raped. Now, these do attract attention, which fulfills both her narcissistic needs and also her histrionic needs to be at the center of attention. But they don't accurately describe what happened. Even when histrionics are exaggerating, however, they know the truth. They know what the truth is. And if they're pushed on it, if they're confronted, then they will back down and they will readily acknowledge that I wasn't actually homeless or I wasn't exactly penniless, but I felt that way.
Why do histrionics use exaggeration?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is because they do tend to be responding emotionally, and the emotional pitch is more important to them than whether it's what a witness would have seen or what was objectively the case. But it's also because this helps keep them in the limelight, helps keep things exciting, makes things interesting, captures the attention of other people, keeps other people on the edge of their seats, or makes things more entertaining for them. And it's because of behaviors like this that histrionic characteristics are quite valued by people who are in the performing arts, and that one finds so much of it in Hollywood. That tendency to be colorful and flamboyant and emotional has a market in our society.
What's the prevalence of a histrionic personality disorder among the general population?
In Hollywood, sky high, and the rest of the country, not so high. But still, there's plenty. I mean, I can't imagine anyone ever has a party without a few being there. It's that common, but but it hasn't been measured to my knowledge.
Dr. DeFrancesca, you reviewed her testimony.
Yes.
Dr. DeFrancesca has testified in this trial that histrionics, and using her words, are people pleasers. Is that the way you would describe histrionic professionally?
When they're in a good mood, that's right. That what histrionics do is to entertain their viewers, whether it's on television or on a date, and they are colorful and they're flamboyant and they're fun. And as long as you don't have to meet their needs, and then it can get tiresome and wear thin. But they can be very attractive and can be a great deal of fun to be with. They know how to work an audience, how to please the people that they want to please. And in that sense, that's true.
Did you have the opportunity to review a letter that the defendant wrote Dr. Dietz in 1988?
Excuse me. To Dr.
A letter that the defendant wrote to Dr. Dietz in 1988?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of that with you?
Mm-hmm.
Were there any particular passages that you took note of in that letter that are specifically illuminating of either the defendant's narcissistic or histrionic personality?
Yes, there are quite a few.
Please go ahead.
Okay, the letter begins, "Dear Dr. Dietz, I am still waiting for the statement of a single fact that led you to your grandiose conclusion." Now, that opening sentence is hostile and accusatory, which, because of the context, can be seen to be an example of this narcissistic rage. What has happened is that he has made a finding and given an opinion in connection with her custody and visitation pursuit that it's unfavorable to her, and she's enraged by that. And so she goes on to attack both him and Dan. In your letter of September 17, 1988, explaining your evaluation of the Broderick custody, I fail to find a single name or fact that leads to your dramatic and totally erroneous conclusion. If I have to tell this story again, I'm going to vomit. Well, that's an example of the narcissistic rage in response to criticism, because she's very angry. It's obvious from what she writes. But it's also histrionic exaggeration. It's not that she's literally going to vomit. It is that she feels that upset, or wants to convey to an audience that she feels that upset. And at the same time, this has within it an example of the narcissistic grandiosity, that sense of being, of having a swelled ego, where she says that there's not a single fact in support of Dr. Dietz's opinion. Well, that's not right, that there wasn't a single fact. However debatable it may have been, that wasn't an accurate statement. She goes on saying, "How dare you submit such bullshit to a court of law? How dare you challenge me to try and grasp the concepts herein when there's not a single concept within?" Well, again, this is exaggerated. It is not an accurate statement that there is no concept there. It is an emotional, flamboyant, angry outburst put in print. Another example of this kind of histrionic exaggeration is on page 3, where she says, "Mr. Broderick is and always has been an abusive, obnoxious, cold-hearted, detached father. The kids hate him." Well, wherever the truth may lie, that's not exactly right. Or on page, I believe this is 5, where she writes, "Mr. Broderick has never taken a summer vacation with his kids. 17 years, exclamation point. And then on the next page, she says, in fact, the same paragraph, Mr. Broderick feebly attempted to perform for the court by taking them to Hawaii and on a motorhome trip, which they hated. Well, not only does she contradict herself, saying he never took them on a trip, and then pointing out he just did, but it shows that he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he doesn't take them on a vacation, then he's no good. If he takes them on a vacation, then he's no good because he must have an ulterior motive. He can't win. She goes on to say, I have 9 volumes of diaries listing times and dates Dan Broderick has terrorized his kids physically and emotionally. Well, that's histrionic exaggeration. Whatever he may have did, he did not terrorize them physically and emotionally, or more to the point, the 9 volumes of diaries, which I've had occasion to review, that do not contain 9 volumes of material about Dan Broderick physically and emotionally terrorizing his kids. They have 9 volumes of what Betty Broderick has to say about many things, but that isn't there. There's no physical, emotional terror.
And she contradicts herself all the time. We heard her say it, not just with Dan, but with her. Like, I can't go anywhere. Oh, I went to Acapulco and I went to Hawaii. I don't have any money. What's this bill? Well, it was $22,000 at Nordstrom's that month, plus wherever else she shopped that Dan paid for. Don't think so. I think she's one of those that has stayed unmarried. Nobody offered to come marry her, as far as I know. And you can't fix her. You know better. You know better. Like, no. Nope. Can you imagine having to read 9 volumes of Betty's diaries? It would be interesting for a little while, and then it'd be like, okay. She's not enough to be a sugar baby. She's going to need more than luck, Flash fan. You can't fix her. She's been in prison for what, 33 years? You can't fix her. She hasn't been fixed yet. See you, Texas Belle. Thanks for joining. Hopefully we see you again soon. We'll be back tomorrow with more of Dr. Dietz and his eyebrows. You'll fix her the Sicilian way? Okay. Sorry, Betty. You should have let Carmen try. You should have let prison fix you. Actually, when she did her little interview with Oprah, the little snippet I could stand to listen to, she said she was better off being in prison. She was better off where she was at. It was peaceful there. She said her mind was quiet. So, I don't know. I don't know if she still feels that way. I don't necessarily care either.
Filling 9 volumes. Where again, on page 11, he left me with no money in a leased car, leased house, both in his name. Not exactly a factually accurate account of what happened. Or he literally terrorized us. These reflect the kind of emotional exaggeration that I was describing. Page 13, there is not a single fact against me as a mother. Page 14, I am also the greatest mother to my 4 kids. There is not a single fact to deny that. Page 15, because of Mr. Broderick's legal maneuvers, I have been without any competent legal representation all along. He's blaming others for her not keeping any of the lawyers she hires. Page 16, Mr. Broderick forcibly took possession of my home, furniture, money, kids. It's histrionic exaggeration about him taking forcible possession of all of those things. Page 18, I had been forcibly kept from my children for over 1 year and I had no legal representation. that's not exactly the way things were. Page 20. Yeah, 20. I will not march quietly to the gas chamber. Well, I don't think that that was in anyone's proposal at the time. These are emotional, colorful outbursts that reflect anger, they reflect emotion, and they intend to have an effect on their audience, get everyone upset, let people know how mad she is. But they can't be taken for accurate accounts of historical truth.
Dr. DeFrancesca has testified recently that, according to her, from her review of the case material, everything was fine with the defendant before 1983. Do you agree with that position, Dr. Dietz?
Well,
Your Honor, I'm sorry.
I'll repeat the question. Dr. DeFrancesca has testified earlier that in her review of the case file materials, at least that she looked at, that everything was fine with the defendant before 1983. Do you agree with that position?
no, I don't think that's quite accurate.
Can you explain for us why that's not accurate?
Sure. Well, there's evidence of these same kinds of features being present before 1983, although it's also the case that her life prior to 1983 hasn't been scrutinized in anything like the same detail, because it's in light of the custody, divorce, and homicide trials that her life's put under a microscope for recent years. And so we have a lot more information about her recent history. But what information does exist about her behavior before that time is consistent with her having the histrionic and narcissistic patterns. For example, there's a passage in the Marriage Encounter book written in 1976. Where Mrs. Broderick wrote, "I've been attracted to and gotten to know what seems to be oodles of men of all types, sizes, and backgrounds. In most cases, after 5 minutes, I have no use for these people. In some cases, it takes quite a while before I write them off as no use to me." Well, that's a statement of someone who uses people. Her assessment of men she meets is, are these people of use to me? That's a posture, not a rare one, but a posture that people take when they are interpersonally exploitive. How can I use this person? Another example is in 1986, I mentioned earlier, she wrote in the same book that she needs admiration. Or when she wrote that what she loved most about Dan was how much he loved her, that is, finding the reflection of her glory in his face, is, again, evidence of narcissism from before 1983. Locking Dan out of the house, criticizing him in front of other people, are examples of her having lack of empathy and perhaps narcissistic rage at that time, or throwing things, scratching and digging in her fingernails, are all examples of times that she could be in a narcissistic rage. Or with respect to the histrionics, even that statement about the oodles of men is a histrionic-like way of phrasing things. But her threatening divorce when things weren't going just her way in the marriage is a histrionic thing to do. Her writing back in '76 that she likes to do what she feels like when she feels like. Again, evidence of her having that histrionic propensity even then. And I have no doubt that if the depth of investigation of her life from that earlier period were to produce as much data as from the later period, that we'd find lots more evidence. That assertion comes from the fact that these things don't have their onset in the 30s or 40s. These conditions have their onset probably in early childhood and always by the end of adolescence, early adulthood.
Now, were you aware that Dr. DeFrancesca diagnosed the defendant as being a borderline personality disorder?
Yes.
Do you agree with that diagnosis?
Well, I don't think the evidence supports it, though there are some features that are consistent with it and reasons why it's right to consider whether the evidence supports it. She has some of the sorts of behaviors that make one wonder if she has that.
What is a borderline personality?
Borderline personality disorder is a pattern, again, with criteria listed in DSM-3R, in which the essential ingredients, the things that must be present, are that there be a pervasive, long-standing pattern of unstable mood, of unstable relationships with other people, and of self-image. Those are the major things that must be true. Now, the unstable mood is something that it shares with histrionic. The shifting emotions of the histrionic could also be seen as the unstable mood of the borderline. There's some overlap between those. The unstable interpersonal relations in borderlines tend to be very pronounced, and it's one of the features that marks them, in that most clinicians have the view, I believe, I certainly do, that it's difficult for anyone to get along with a borderline personality disordered person for very long, because the relationships become so unstable. These people are typically in and out of marriages constantly. Often there's a great deal of substance abuse or other highly impulsive, destructive acts. They will sometimes be in and out of seemingly intimate relationships within a week, may have several people with whom they have intense, passionate affairs, and then it's broken off. Very dramatic extremes. And they're often described by those who know them as being like an emotional roller coaster. And because that is so very difficult to get along with, they do not often survive long in a stable relationship with anyone, which is one of the reasons I don't think that's applicable here.
You did say that the defendant did exhibit certain borderline traits.
Yes.
What were those that you saw in the case file?
Well, some particular traits that are more characteristic of borderlines than the other conditions. As I say, there's some overlap among these. There's some things that you could say it's a borderline trait, or maybe it's a narcissistic or histrionic, because they're all very related. But the things that are more borderline-like, for which there's evidence, are one in which she tends to see things in black or white. Sometimes this is referred to as splitting. An individual can be regarded by a borderline or someone who has this trait, which also occurs in narcissism, by the way, as being a very good person, somebody that's looked up to, admired, and respected. And then for some reason, good or bad, the reason could be trivial even, the person is suddenly denounced and is now regarded as the embodiment of all evil. And I think we see Mrs. Broderick doing that with Dan, as he went from being very highly regarded by her to being condemned and thought to be the root of all of her problems. That can be seen either as narcissistic rage, or if she were to go back and forth between those two states, it would be more like a borderline. If she were running back to him every few weeks saying, I love you passionately, we have to be together again, and they got together for a week and then it fell apart again, that's the way a borderline would tend to behave. On again, off again. But she does tend to see things in black and white. She's dealt this way with her friends. She's dealt this way with family members. She's dealt this way with emotionally. Histrionics do that, and they have these swings of emotions. Narcissists may do that too, though it's not one of the listed features. But in borderlines, we expect to see a lot of that. So once again, some of those examples could be called either way. I think on balance, though, when you look at all of the evidence and how her life has progressed, when you look exactly at what the criteria of DSM-3 specify, that the correct diagnoses were the ones that Dr. Goldspan rendered of histrionic and narcissistic.
Is the borderline personality disorder all that uncommon?
Many of us wish it were, because they're very difficult patients and they provoke so much trouble, but it isn't uncommon. It's become the most commonly diagnosed condition of the female college students who go to college mental health centers, for example. It's the bulk of their caseload these days.
Do you find exhibited?
All of the, not all, nearly all of the character traits described for that group of personality disorders that are in cluster B of the DSM-3R. The diagnostic manual divides the personality disorders into several clusters that are thought to be related to each other. The second one listed, there's A, B, C. This B, the second one listed, has narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and finally, antisocial personality disorder. I've already talked about the first three, but Mrs. Broderick also has a lot of the adult features of antisocial personality disorder.
Doctor, let's move on to Dr. DeFrancesca's diagnosis of the defendant was suffering from major depression recurrent type. Do you recall looking at the transcript and seeing her arrive at that diagnosis?
Yes.
And you recall her testimony regarding that?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with that diagnosis?
No.
Why is that?
Well, there's several reasons why I don't think that the diagnosis is quite correct. The first is that none of the doctors who treated.
Is that her parents? Sorry, I was trying to see if there was anything I could fix on my end to make this go smoother. I cannot come up with anything, so I apologize. But then I looked up and I'm like, is that her parents? I know her kids. The daughter, the first daughter we saw testify, and then I think Lee sitting on the other side of her. I haven't got a good look at her, so I'm not sure yet. But then I wondered if that was her parents. Also, we're doing great on time. Look at us.
Mrs. Broderick diagnosed a major depressive illness. The doctor who knew her the best, Dr. Nelson, who treated her from early 1987 until July of 1989, testified that whatever depression Mrs. Broderick had didn't disable her and didn't make her inactive, and that the testing results, quote, showed no evidence of what we would call serious psychopathology, end quote. Moreover, Dr. Nelson saw her later in the latter part of 1989, just a month before the homicides, and he didn't find any major depression then either. Another reason is that Mrs. Broderick's diaries show times when she got upset for a day or two, but there were always obvious reasons for why she was getting upset. And the direction her upset took was not consistently depression or even a variation on the theme. That is, times she would be anxious, she would be angry, she would be what she characterized as hysterical. It's not often that she characterized herself as sad, though sometimes she said she was depressed. But more to the point, her diaries show these particular complaints to be fleeting. They didn't last long. She'd write about it for a day, sometimes 2 days in a row, then it wouldn't be there again, and she'd be back to talking about the other things. She'd have a day or two where she said she couldn't sleep, and then she'd make no mention of that for a while. Or she'd talk about a week when she gained some weight, and then that wouldn't be mentioned for a while. Or she'd talk about a time when she just didn't feel like doing much, but it wouldn't last long. A major depressive illness, that diagnosis, is only given when a particular set of signs and symptoms listed in the manual are present for a sufficient length of time. And the key is that the symptoms have to occur simultaneously. If someone has sleeplessness for a few nights one week and the next week they gain weight, and the week after that they don't have any energy, and the week after that they feel sad, that isn't major depression. It all has to happen at once, and it has to stay that way for a period. Traditionally, the cutoff point was at least 2 weeks of feeling that way every day or nearly every day. We don't arbitrarily cut it off at exactly 2 weeks now, but the idea is there has to be a period of time where the person consistently feels this way. It can't just be that they had a bad day or that they had a lousy weekend. It has to be something more intense than that. Also, it used to be thought that we wouldn't even count it as major depression if it had an obvious cause. That's changed, and we recognize that sometimes people can get a biological illness of a major depression, even when there's some provocation, something that's making them that way. Still, getting upset for things that have an obvious cause for a day or two doesn't mean one has that illness. Normal people sometimes get upset when bad things happen in their lives. Doesn't mean they have a mental illness to get upset about things. at none of the times that we have data about Mrs. Broderick, either from observers of her or from her diaries, does she have enough of the symptoms simultaneously for long enough to qualify for a diagnosis of major depressive illness. And no one who saw her before the homicides ever said she did. Yet another reason is her functioning. And this goes to how bad any depression she had could have been. Because there's no doubt there were times Mrs. Broderick was depressed. Everyone who's seen her knows that there are times that she's been sad, times she's been depressed. Part of how we evaluate how severe a depression is to see whether it is this depressive disorder, the illness that I was just describing. But another way is to see whether the person can function even while they have that. Someone who gets sad and still keeps up with their work isn't as depressed as someone who's too sad to go to work that day or to get dressed. And they're not as severely depressed as someone who has the psychosis that their body's rotting from the inside and they're about to die, which is what happens in the most serious depressions. There are different severities of depression, from simple sadness up to those very psychotic illnesses. Well, to look at how someone's doing, one thing is to look at their symptoms, and others to see how they're getting on in life, what their functioning is. In Mrs. Broderick's case, her functioning was such that even if she had a major depression, which I don't think is evidenced, at most it could be mild in severity because of the things she was still capable of doing. She ran an independent household, including shopping for herself and shopping for other people. She decorated her house. She decorated her condo. She traveled extensively. She remained very involved in the children's school. She served on social committees. She had cosmetic surgery. She explored career opportunities, including a legal or paralegal career, looking at working at the art gallery in La Jolla, considered opening a photography studio, a photography business. She served as president of the investment club. She became involved in a legal reform organization known as HALT. She spoke at public hearings. She gave numerous interviews with reporters. She maintained a stable and intimate relationship with a boyfriend. She rewrote declarations that her lawyers had drafted. She presented her own case in December of 1988. She planned camping trips with the boys, and she even wrote a book. That's functioning. That's getting on with life. That's doing things in the world, even if they weren't the things she most wanted to do. That's not the behavior of someone with a major depression who won't get out of the same pajamas or comb their hair day after day after day and week after week after week.
Doctor, do you recall Dr. DeFrancesca's testimony regarding depression on this masking concept, that sometimes the defendant would appear, quote, normal, but that was because she was masking her depression?
Yes.
Do you have any comments on that particular concept?
Well, there is such a thing as a masked depression, but most of the time that people don't look depressed, the explanation for that is that they aren't, not that they're masking it.
What about Dr. DeFrancesca's testimony that the defendant was consistently diagnosed in the past as being depressed by other mental health professionals? Do you agree with that position?
Well, as I said, everyone recognized there were times she was depressed, but no one ever diagnosed her as having a major depressive illness, as far as I could see, up until Dr. DeFrancesca did so, or at least up until after the homicides.
Does the evidence in your review of the entire materials of this case file show the defendant to have been suicidal when she was depressed?
It does not.
Can you tell us why that is?
Sure. Well, first of all, in many ways, Mrs. Broderick is too narcissistic to kill herself. She wouldn't want to spoil such a special and perfect thing as herself. It's difficult for narcissists to harm themselves because of the high regard in which they hold themselves. Secondly, there's no evidence that she ever attempted suicide. At the most, there is the phenomenon of histrionic gesture, in which she scratches her wrists and takes some pills about the house to call attention to being upset, and doesn't do anything that in fact could bring about death. Now, there are teenage girls who mistakenly think sometimes that taking certain kinds of medications that actually won't harm them may kill them. But Mrs. Broderick had been married to Dan during medical school, and she's an intelligent woman, and she knows what's capable of producing death and what isn't. So this is a histrionic gesture, not a suicide attempt to scratch her wrists and take some pills. She also said that she'd never kill herself and give Dan what he wanted. Even when she was feeling her worst and listed various complaints in her diary, including going pretty far down the chain of what sort of things one's likely to complain about, what she didn't do is mention thoughts of suicide. And in fact, when one looks at the diary entries surrounding the times that she's said she was suicidal, there isn't any mention in the diary of her being suicidal at those times. A fifth reason is that her anger was always directed outward, much more than it was directed inward. She was very angry for a long period of time, but she made it rather clear to whom she was directing her anger, and it wasn't herself. Sixth, when she made threats, it was threats of homicide. She repeatedly threatened homicide, but she wasn't repeatedly threatening suicide. Seventh, she was recognized by others as being at risk of homicide, but not of suicide. In fact, even to the point that Dan and Linda hired guards at various points to protect them from her. Multiple people knew that she was at risk of killing them. Eighth, she'd shown some of the very specific signs of someone being dangerous to others, that is, warning signs of homicidal behavior, such as uttering threats to kill, not just when she was angry and emotional and being histrionic, but even when calm. Calm threats to kill are much more ominous and predictive than sort of hysterical outbursts, and she had made even calm threats. She had also destroyed symbols of Dan, which is another one of the predictors of who was likely to kill another person. She had defaced a photograph of Dan. She'd burned his clothing. Those are symbolic moves of the kind that we've learned through research. I happen to do research on that phenomenon, are predictive of violence toward other people. And she had even assaulted Dan's home with her vehicle, which caused him to emerge, where she could engage him in face-to-face combat. Those are behaviors predictive of violence toward others, not predictive of violence towards oneself. The ninth reason is that even in her book, which she claims was written when she was suicidal, she doesn't make any mention of being suicidal. And on the contrary, what she wrote was, quote, "If this is the way domestic disputes are settled in the courts, is there any wonder there are so many murders?" So, in contrast to her saying she was suicidal, what she implies was she realizes that murders grow out of events like these. And the 10th reason is that she committed homicide, not suicide.
Doctor, you testified that personality disorders such as narcissism and histrionic personalities developed in late adolescence. Is that correct?
That's right. Or at least by then. That is, they may well be firmly fixed by age 3 or 4 in the eyes of some of the people who studied this, but they're at least in place by late adolescence or early adulthood.
Are these personality disorders caused by, let's say, a bad marriage?
No,
Or a spouse having an affair?
no.
Or a divorce?
Well, maybe of one's own parents plays a part in it.
You're talking about during or before adolescence, I assume.
Right.
And what is the main difference between personality disorders and somebody who's, let's say, has a psychotic mental illness?
Well, in a psychotic mental illness, individuals have one of the symptoms of psychosis by definition. You can't have a psychotic mental illness unless you have either hallucinations or delusions or a thought disorder. Now, hallucinations are things like hearing voices or seeing things. They're perceptions that are not true. Mrs. Broderick never had any hallucinations, and no one has ever said she did, to my knowledge, not in any of the materials I've seen. Delusions are such features as patently false or absurd beliefs, believing that the planes flying overhead are giving one a particular set of messages about when the Martians are going to invade. That's a delusional belief. Mrs. Broderick's never had any delusional beliefs in the opinions of anybody who has dealt with her in any of the materials I've had occasion to look at. And the third feature of a psychotic illness is that of a disorder of the form of thought. Now, that's a technical phrase that refers to having one's thinking so disturbed that it's impossible for the person to really communicate meaningfully with other people. So, for example, someone who can only speak in rhymes and riddles and no one can understand what they're saying may have a serious thought disorder. Or the individual who can only communicate with special words that they make up, or who's always making up words, can have a thought disorder. There are lots of other ways in which thought disorder happens, but there's no evidence Mrs. Broderick ever had one. The features of psychosis, of psychotic mental illnesses, are all those things that mean that someone's out of touch with reality because they're seeing things or hearing things, or they can't communicate with other people, or their beliefs are taken over by the mental illness. The mental illness interferes greatly with a person's life, and there's nothing they can do about it except get treated for it. Whereas in personality disorder, it's the pattern of behavior that is in conscious awareness. The individual knows what they're doing, knows why they're doing it, makes choices, makes their own decisions, plots their own course, and they're not ruled by it. That is, in personality disorder, the condition doesn't rule the person rules the condition, and they behave as they wish on purpose.
Doctor, does a personality disorder make a person crazy?
No,
Does it prevent a person from knowing what he or she is doing?
no, it doesn't.
Does it cause amnesia or to make the person forget things that they've done?
No, it doesn't.
Does it prevent a person from being deceptive?
From what?
From being deceptive?
No, it does not prevent that.
Does it prevent a person from planning things and acting according to that plan?
No,
And does it prevent a person from making choices of what course of conduct to take?
no.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
We'll take our 3 seconds for that.
Wow. I did not expect him to. Now my dog's barking, Flash fan. I did not expect him to finish direct. We have 4 parts to his testimony. And obviously we just finished 1. So we have 3 more. But I thought maybe it'd be divided 2 and 2. I did not expect him to finish that. Carmen, thank you for the gifted membership. I appreciate it. I'm sorry. But I thank you. Okay, so I've been sitting here thinking. 2 things I've been sitting here thinking. 1, how much has this guy's testimony ticked off Betty? Because he's calling her out on everything. And 2, the defense will just have to say he's not had a lot to work with. He doesn't ask the best questions. At least he hasn't so far. This guy is very smart. He's very well spoken. Knows what he's talking about. I know, like Flashman has said, his testimony, I think, in the Dietz trial was controversial. I don't know. I can't speak to it. But I think I think the defense attorney is going to have a hard time with him. I just think he's just I think he's just smarter than the defense attorney. You know, it's Monday. It's Monday. Thanks, Gabby. That's all. Yep, I hear you. I'm with you. All right, took that banner down. Come back here. Do you know the Magic 8 Ball doesn't lie? Monday Fun Day. Anyway, let's get him off of there. What do you have to say, Flashbean? Doesn't matter that case. And this is the only one issues was her reference in Law and Order episode to explain Yates' condition. All right, so tomorrow we will go on with part 2 of his testimony. Like I said, I was dreading this, but I'm not like I like him. He just talks to you. He's not so far, because we can see him flip when they're getting cross-examined. He's come across just very, I don't know, he's kind of matter of fact. Like, I've studied this, that, and the other, and very knowledgeable. He's looked at all her stuff. Unlike, who was that one guy who never even like interviewed Betty? He's at least looked at all her things to get an idea of who she is and how she thinks and how she functions and operates and why she may have done what she did. And I think he's laying it out very, very nicely. I have wondered, though, as we've been listening to him, because this is 1991, a while ago, how much has changed in what he has studied and how much has stayed the same in where they were in their research and their conclusions that they were coming to about depression or the narcissistic disorder, the borderline personality disorder, those things 30 plus years later. I wonder where he is on that stuff now. Like, what's changed? How do they approach it? Has that changed at all? I would say it would have to. But yeah, he'd be an interesting person to talk to. I would have to look up only to hear, because I could not look at those eyebrows. I swear it's a string. It's pulling back, because I was watching, like, are you holding? I will stop, but they're driving me crazy. At least gives me something to focus on. So tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time. I can't remember. Let me take a look, see how long his stuff is tomorrow. I think all his stuff is fairly. So we got about an hour, just over an hour tomorrow. So won't be too bad. It will probably be not as, I don't know what it's going to be like, because the defense attorney, I'm not anti-defense. You guys all know that. But this defense attorney, yikes. Betty's been denied parole 3 times. Her first denial was in January 2010, followed by another denial in November 2011, a third in January 2017. She will not be eligible again until January 2032. Dang, I thought her last one was more recent than 2017. Whoops. Lori was a better lawyer. Might be. Just this once. Just this one time. He's an emoji. What? Who? The doctor or the lawyer? I don't know. I'm going to go before this glitches on me again. Let's hope they get it fixed tomorrow, like while we're sleeping or whatever. And we don't have this problem tomorrow, but I've got a banner if we do. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Adair time. If you can get away from that pickleball, Adair. California equals where life means 68 years old, then parole. Well, I think she'll be 80 some when she is up again. Did I see 88 maybe? She may not make it. I don't know. 84. It's been 84 years. She'll be saying it's been 84 years. All right, you guys. Take care, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow.